Yeah, now it's on.
It's ready. All right.
All right.
You're recording.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's topic is, why does God challenge us? One that is a very difficult topic to discuss at a time when we're going through such incredible. What we're not going to talk about tonight, why bad things happen to good people. That is not the topic that we're looking more on 30,000 feet, which means what is the whole principle and the concept of challenges that God gives us? What is it meant to achieve on a spiritual, the entire purpose of creation? I'll begin with tonight. First of all, I'd like to dedicate tonight for Shlema from my mother, Gutta Basenya Chasha, who's unfortunately suffering. She went into hospital for other reasons as well. She does have the virus, and she's in New York, NYU. And for us as a family, it's quite a challenging time. To know that she is there alone, that I've been stuck here, unable to go, unable to be with her at such a difficult time for her, is really hard. In addition, not only am I not there, but even the siblings I have in New York are unable to be there with her. The maximum they're able to do is to speak to her on the phone. And even that's not simple because she's not tech savvy. So the best we have is that we got her a dumb phone and communicates with us sporadically. And she is there in that state now, and that's really, really tough. So those are some of the challenges that I'm going through at the moment. In addition to the, of course, one that everyone is going through at this time, with this incredible plague that's hit us, this virus that is attacking so many of us. In addition, we have the economic uncertainty and challenges associated with that over and above the actual plague itself. Of course, these we haven't experienced in our lifetime, or possibly a number of lifetimes. With that, let's get into the meat of the topic at hand tonight. So the fact that God challenges us is obvious. Just look around and you see that it happens always. The question is, what our perspective on those challenges are meant to be. What is it all about? So there is in the Torah, in Deuteronomy, the Torah speaks about the what we call a false prophet. That if a person should come and he will prophesy falsely that God has spoken to him and told him that he should go worship idols or disconnect from God, and you should not listen to him, says the Torah. For God is testing you. Ki menasa Hashem Elokeichem eschem. God is testing you. Ladas, to know Hayim es Hashem Elokeichem. To know if you actually love God. So the basic principle is that if someone comes along and he is is prophesizing that he should work against anything that God has commanded us in the Torah, and he makes a sign, he makes an actual miracle happen to entice you to, you should know, says the Torah, do not believe in him. And the reason this is happening, the reason he was able to do this miracle is because Hashem is testing you. Why is Hashem testing you? So the verse concludes, to know if you are committed to Hashem, if you are loving Hashem. So the commentaries ask the question. It's a very obvious question. And the question is, God knows. God has to test us to know. God knows what's having to test us. So why does it say that God is testing us in order for it would seem for him to know? So this is a question of many commentaries. And one of them, the Ramban, Nachmanides, his response to this is the following. Nachmanides says that he said that the meaning of it is that person should have the reward not only of a good heart, but of good deed. That what it means, what is Hashem is testing you. Why does Hashem test you? In order for you to bring it to the surface. That which you have within you, the good that you have within you, should actually come to the surface. And then Hashem, so to speak, rewards you not only for your good heart, answer. And he said, but it really doesn't fit well with the verse. Because the verse says, Hashem is testing you, ladas, to know. What's it have to do to know, based on what we're saying now? And therefore, he, in a different understanding of what the purpose, what does this mean, ladas, to know? And his response, he then goes into the following explanation. What he says is like this. This goes to the entire purpose, really, of creation. He says that the soul, prior to its descent on earth, is there is a divine revelation, and a divine experience. To this world, in order for what? Here in this world, things one cannot recognize and see God obviously. Sorry for the pause. Technological challenges, but we're back on. Hopefully, so here's another challenge we have. Okay, so this soul comes into this world, and in this world, it has all these challenges, it has all these difficulties, and lack of money, lack of health. And what's the point? And what's the purpose? The purpose
Okay, so there's a little there. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Yeah, good.
Okay, sorry for that. Hopefully, we've gone to another device and another connection, and hopefully we won't have this problem again. Okay. So the reason for the test is in order. Wait, people here? Okay. So the reason for the test is for a person to reach what he calls a level of das. What's the level of das mean? That is, now we should have a total recognition and an appreciation as in Hashem. That is to say, that you come to a appreciation that just like you know that you are alive because your soul and life is your body, so too you will know that Hashem is the one who gives you life and gives you existence in every respect, in every single area. Now, why is it that tests allow you to reach this level of connection to your soul and connection to Hashem, that you have this incredible, deeper level of connection and bond with God? So to understand this, we need to discuss another topic, a broad topic in Kabbalah. And it's the topic what we call Birer HaNitzaitzis. Birer HaNitzaitzis means refining the divine spark. And so, what is this all about? Every single thing in this world is embedded. There is embedded within it a divine spark, which is the reason that it exists. This divine spark gives it life and existence, and every single item and every single aspect of the world has this divine spark. There is nothing in this world that is devoid of this divine spark. For if it was, it wouldn't exist. Everything across the board. Indeed, there's a Medrash Tehillim that is made famous by the Baal Shem Tov, that there's on the verse, La'olam Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim, forever Hashem, your words are in the heavens. So the meaning of that is that your words, which you created, the 10 utterances by which God created the world, those divine utterances are constantly, consistently within every aspect of creation. And without which, if these divine utterance with which God created the world in the first place would cease to exist, would, so to speak, be removed from the world, or from any aspect of the world, then that thing in the world would cease. It would cease to exist, because it would lose its neshama, its soul. It would lose its actual, that which is giving it existence. And therefore, we have the concept that Hashem has to recreate the world at every moment. We know, we say in davening every morning that that Hashem renews in His kindness every single day the works of creation. That means, what does that mean? That Hashem, just like He spoke the world into existence in the first instance, when Hashem created the world, so too Hashem speaks the world into existence every moment of creation. The words of Hashem are in every aspect of creation. That's what we call the divine spark within everything in creation. And that's where the matrix gets it from. That there are letters that give everything its existence. Now, when we say that there's divine spark in every aspect of creation, it's not limited to good things or to neutral things. Even negative things also have the divine spark in it, because nothing could exist without the divine energy. So even negative things also have a divine energy in it, otherwise they couldn't exist. This we see when King David says, David HaMelech says, Ki Hashem amar lo kalel, Shimi ben Gera cursed David, cursed David, and David HaMelech says, Hashem amar lo kalel. God told him to curse. God never told Shimi to curse. But he means the very fact that he was able to curse meant that it was with divine permission, or God actually told him to curse because he was able to do so. The divine energy within him allowed him to do so. That meant to say that this is what Hashem wanted, because nothing happens in our world if Hashem doesn't desire it, doesn't want it to happen. I know it's challenging when we think about all the terrible things happening and all the challenges happening, but could put that aside for a moment, because that's an emotional question, and we're dealing now with trying to understand it intellectually. The issue of why bad things happen to good people is, generally speaking, an emotional question, and therefore it can't really be explained intellectually, and that's not what we're trying to do tonight. Tonight we're trying to go, as I said, in 30,000 feet, in understanding intellectually the concept of challenge. So what we do know is that every single aspect in creation has a divine spark. Our task as we come into this world is twofold. Number one, we are meant to access this divine spark for the purpose of elevating it. In addition, the other dimension in it is that this divine spark has some vitamin, so to speak, some energy, some positivity, some remarkable qualities that actually elevate us. I'll give you a way of example. Actually, we're coming to the Yom Tov of Pesach. So the eating of matzah, we're told by the Zohar, in the Zohar it says that we eat matzah is called the bread of faith. Actually, that matzah on the second night of Pesach, the Zohar says, is the bread of healing. The first night of Pesach, matzah is the bread of faith. Why is the matzah the bread of faith? Because there are, so to speak, vitamins within the matzah that strengthen a Jewish person's faith. How does it work? So the Talmud tells us, Ein atinoik yedei alikis abba ad sheyitem tam doga. A child is unable to say Father until he eats wheat, until he has grain. So you normally, a child, when does he eat? When does he begin to say Daddy? When he's at the age where you're feeding him foods made of grain. So the Talmud's telling us that there's some vitamins in the grain that when the child eats it, that kind of strengthens his mind to the extent that now he can recognize his father, that this is his father. And when a child recognizes his father, that this is his father, the child at that time doesn't have the full comprehension of why he's his father, what makes him his father. He just knows there's some bond, there's a connection, Daddy. and it just senses that fact. And what strengthens it, what allows him to have that feeling, the fact that he ate grain. So just like that is the case by a child in general, we, the Jewish people, as a nation, were children when we went out of Egypt. As we're going out of Egypt, we're now a child. Took us a while to grow up, but that's when we were children. That's the birth of our nation going out of Egypt. So at that time, when we are born, in order for us to recognize Hashem, who came down and revealed himself to take us out of Egypt, we had to eat matzah. Because the vitamins within the matzah were vitamins of faith. And when the Jew ate, therefore, the Jews were actually, we say in the Haggadah that the reason we eat matzah, because there was no time for the bread to rise, and therefore the only food they had was matzah. But in fact, in Egypt, they also had a command to eat matzah. They had to bring a Paschal lamb. They had to be locked into they had to be quarantined in their homes the night before they went out of Egypt. And they had to eat matzah that night before going out of Egypt, before there was no time for the bread to rise. Why did they have to eat matzah before they went out of Egypt? If the whole reason we're eating matzah today is because there was no time for the bread to rise, the answer is because there is a spiritual vitamin in the matzah, there's the energy, the spark of God in the matzah that feeds the soul and helps the soul have faith in God. And that's what the Jews needed at that time, to be able to go out of Egypt, to the unknown, to follow God into the wilderness. Even though, of course, Egypt was the most terrible experience for them, but at least it was the known. It was the perspective that they had, and they understood and they appreciated. Now we're telling them, leave Egypt, leave an environment you know. Where are we going? To the wilderness. How are we going to live in the wilderness? Have faith. How are you going to exist in the wilderness? Have faith. How would they have faith? That's why they had to have matzah. Matzah fed their faith. Why? Because there's a vitamin in the matzah that feeds faith. So that is a general principle that when we access anything in this world, there is a spark of godliness in it that we need. And when we partake of that spark of godliness, it elevates us to a certain part in a particular way. As a matter of fact, the Baal Shem Tov says that when you desire food, he quotes a pasuk in Tehillim, you're hungry and thirsty. You think you're hungry and thirsty because you want the food. You like the taste of the food, or you want the food. But the truth is, the reason you're hungry and thirsty is because your soul wants the divine spark in that item of food. So that is the general principle, that there's a spark of godliness in food, and there's a spark of godliness in everything. And that is why we acquire things, stuff, and everything that we acquire, actually, that the spark of godliness and those things that belong to us have a connection to our soul. So this is the general principle of the spark of godliness and everything in creation that relates to us. When it comes to doing a mitzvah, what we do then is we extract, if you like, the spark of godliness of a physical item, and then we elevate it through doing the mitzvah with it. So that spark now, so to speak, is redeemed from a state of exile, and now is able to be elevated to a higher state. That is any mitzvah that we do. So when we put on tefillin, or we light a candle, or we shake a lulav, we blow a shofar, every physical item that we use has a spark of godliness in it, and by doing a mitzvah with it, we're now elevating that spark that was in it, and by the virtue of the fact that we elevate the spark, it also serves to lift us, to elevate us, to make us greater and higher as well. Because these sparks of godliness actually have an original source, according to Kabbalah, that is even in this aspect, in the sense, greater than us. And when we access it, therefore, why is it that when a person eats food, it gives him energy? Because there's something in the food that we lack, without, that we're lacking without, and by eating it, it gives us this energy, whether it be the vitamins or minerals, whatever it is that is in these food, in these food items that we eat, that gives us life and energy. Same thing spiritually. There's something in the spark of godliness that is in the food item or in the mitzvah item, that when we partake and participate and fulfill a mitzvah, that spark is now refined and elevated. As a matter of fact, this concept goes so far as to say and as to explain why is it that there is a command in the Torah that we don't go back to Egypt. Because being that our main task on earth is to refine these divine sparks, when we were in Egypt, we refined all the sparks that were in Egypt. 202 sparks that were in Egypt were refined by the Jewish people after leaving Egypt. And therefore the Torah commands us, don't go back there. You have nothing to find there. There's nothing in Egypt for you. You've already, as the Talmud says, we've made it as a granary without grain, as a fishery without fish. We've already taken it all out. All the sparks have been taken out, and it's unnecessary for us to engage with Egypt any longer. That's how far this concept goes. Now, in the elevation of these divine sparks, you have a number of different levels and different aspects. Number one is, as I said, positive mitzvahs we do, the participation in different aspects of the world, participate, we engage with, and we elevate through our engagement with it. But then there is sparks of godliness that fell so low that actively you cannot extract. What are they? Those are the things we're not allowed to do. So food items that we're allowed to eat means we can access the divine spark in those food items. Food items we're not allowed to eat. That means we're unable to access the divine spark in those food items. That's why pig or any other food that is not kosher means it's something that we can't access directly and refine and elevate. That's called a loisasa. That's called a mitzvah that we're not allowed to do. Why is Hashem told us not to do? Because you can't access the spark there. If that's the case, how do we, isn't there a divine spark in everything? Truth is there is. There's a divine spark, otherwise it couldn't exist. So a pig and other non-kosher items also has a divine spark. But it's so deeply embedded that we're not able to access it. What can we do? So number one, when we don't do a sin, we push it aside. And that act of pushing it aside has some form of elevation. The fact that it enticed us, or could have enticed us, and we didn't engage, and we didn't action that enticement, that in itself helps us elevate it somewhat. But then there's what we know is called a Baal Tshuva. A Baal Tshuva, where instead the Talmud tells us, the Makim Shebal Tshuva Eimdim Ein Tzadikim Gemurim Michael Lamed. That with the status and the level of a Baal Tshuva is far greater than even a tzaddik. That the greatest tzaddikim cannot reach the level of Baal Tshuva. Why? Because a tzaddik isn't able to access the sparks Okay. Okay, so there's a general principle that everything higher falls lower. Like the example given is that of a wall, and if the wall falls down, that which was on the top falls the furthest. So the sparks of godliness that are actually in the sin are those sparks that fall the furthest. So, but where did it originate? If it fell the furthest, meaning it's in the sin, it originates at a much higher, greater level. Now, we don't have the time in the context of the shir to explain the different levels where they originate from. But suffice it to say that the lower something is, it has a source in a much higher, deeper level. So hence, if there was any way to access it, then that would achieve an amazing result. But normally we can't access it. The Baal Tshuva has a way of accessing it. Why? This is a Baal Tshuva who does what's called Tshuva Ma'ava, Tshuva out of love. The Baal Tshuva who does Tshuva out of love works as follows. It works as such, that once he's done a sin, if a person's done a sin, and because of that sin he feels that he's distant and not as close to Hashem as he should be, and then he develops a sense of yearning. And for Hashem, because of the sin that he did, then because of that sin, he now has a yearning for God that is even greater than a tzaddik. And when that takes place and that happens, he actually elevates and refines that very spark of godliness that was distant. That spark of godliness that the tzaddik was not able to access, the Baal Tshuva is able to access. He's able to take it, utilize it, and it becomes a springboard for his closeness to Hashem. So you're saying that the sinite, if the person's sin becomes the springboard for the reason that he's becoming closer to Hashem, then that's why the Gemara says, Zdainas nasa like is that the sins become mitzvahs. Because that is the reason for his closeness now. Parenthetically, just by the way, this concept necessitates a very high level of tshuva. It's not just regular tshuva where one regrets what he's done and says, okay, from now on I'm not going to do it anymore. And you start acting positively. It actually has to engender within you a passion and yearning and a movement towards God that you would never have had if you didn't sin. Only then do we say that the tshuva makes the sins in the middle. But there's another way. The Rebbe actually Lubavitcher Rebbe gave a perspective, a fascinating perspective. And he actually advised people who came to him and asked them about certain things that they did that were unsavory. We're talking about. So we're saying that if I, who always kept kosher, is trying to convince someone to keep kosher, who never did, he doesn't necessarily relate to me properly, because you've always kept kosher, I haven't, so you can't really understand me. But if someone who throughout his life didn't keep kosher, started keeping kosher, and then he tries to convince someone to keep kosher, then okay, he knows the challenges. He in his lifetime also didn't keep kosher, and now he is. So that encourages me to do the mitzvah. So what comes out from that is that his sin of the past actually causes me to do the mitzvah now. Hence, you could say that by encouraging another person to do a mitzvah that you once didn't do, that's how you elevate the sin that you once did. Because that sin is now the springboard for another person's mitzvah. So going out of your way to encourage others to do things that you did not do is the acts of godliness and transform it to be a mitzvah. So that is a general principle that we say that about tshuva is greater than a tzaddik because of this reaches those sparks of godliness that originate at a very high level, originate in a very high source. He's able to reach it when the tzaddik is unable to reach it. Then we have one more aspect, and that's the aspect of challenges. Challenges, by the way, can be all sorts of challenges. Now, and discuss actually, I will now discuss 5 different levels of challenges that the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, mentions, and they are based on prototypes in the Torah. There's 5 levels of prototypes of challenges. The first is the Lakim Nisas Avram. Hashem challenges Avram. What does he challenge Avram? To take his son and bring him onto the altar. That is the challenge of a Mesiras Nefesh. Throughout the ages, we had Jews who were willing to give their life for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for Hashem, and not to worship idols and not to convert their religion, to do things that it was extremely difficult for them, and to do it anyway. We don't necessarily mean challenge of Mesiras Nefesh, literally giving your life, but the challenge is when something is really hard and you do it anyway because Hashem asked you to do it. That's the first level of, but when it's really hard, if it's not really hard, it's not called a challenge. That's normal living. But when something is extremely difficult and you do it, that's challenge number 1. That's the prototype of Avraham Avinu. The second prototype is the prototype of Job. Prototype of Job is, of course, Job suffered tremendous physical and financial suffering. He lost his money, he lost his family, he suffered illness himself. And we see how in the prophet, it's actually called an Isayon. It's actually called Hanisa. Elikim, there's expression of challenge. So the challenge of Job represents the challenge that many of us are going through now. The challenge of not having finances, the challenge of not having good health, the challenges of difficult things happening in one's life. And nevertheless, to overcome them and to do what's right, that's overcoming your challenges. So that's the second level of challenge. The third level of challenge is the challenge of King David. What's the challenge of King David? Even though the Gemara says anyone who says David sinned is making a mistake, but the simple reading of the Tanakh seems to say that David didn't do the right thing. And it was a challenge. As a matter of fact, King David said an expression, Hashem challenged me, and Hashem did, and he failed, it seems. And what was that challenge? That was a challenge of being enticed. That's a third level of challenge, that you are enticed if your Yetzer Hara, evil inclination, has interest in doing things that is not savory, and you overcome it. That's a third level of challenge. Fourth level of challenge is also relevant today, and that's the challenge of faith. The challenge of faith means, like the class with the case of the Navi Sheker, the false prophet. The false prophet comes along and says, do X, Y, Z, and he makes a miracle. And it seems to you that it's an actual miracle. Now's not the time to discuss if Judaism believes that a false prophet is capable to make a miracle or not. Suffice it to say, different opinions in our Rishonim. The original authorities, first authorities, have different opinions on that. But nevertheless, when you see that, it challenges your faith. You see these events taking place in the world that says, where is God? We see the suffering that is going on now. And so there's the challenge of the actual suffering. But then there's the challenge of the faith that comes about through the suffering that exists. Like, where's God? How can he allow circumstances like this? How can he allow these kinds of things to happen in his world? That is also a challenge. So that is the fourth level of challenge. The challenge of why bad things happen to good people. The challenge of not seeing God in this world, not seeing God revealed in this world, and seeing how things go in a way that it would seem to be to us in an opposite direction of the way it should be. That is the fourth challenge, the challenge of faith. And the fifth level of challenge is the challenge of good fortune. By the giving of the Torah says an expression, Kiva La'avur in Pashas Yisroi, the portion of giving of the Torah, there's an expression, La'avur nasis eschem ba'elikim. In order to challenge you, God has come. So Rashi indeed says, what's the challenge? Giving you the Torah, what's the challenge? So Rashi says it means to lift you. This could also mean like a banner. So what does it mean? Hashem has given you the Torah to lift you up. That's Rashi's explanation on that verse. Nachmanides, Rambam's explanation in Moreh Nevuchim, he says, in order to challenge you means as follows. Now that you've seen God reveal himself at Mount Sinai, so no matter whatever charlatan comes along afterwards to try to convince you otherwise, you will know that it's not true. So in other words, in order to be able to challenge you with other faiths or other perspectives, Hashem came to reveal himself to you at Sinai. Because indeed, as the Rambam says elsewhere, that the greatest proof of Judaism is the fact that we all were present at the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Every single Jew, millions of Jews were present at the giving of the Torah. That is the greatest proof of any event in history. And we're not going to go into the details of that. We can discuss it if you want to with me another time. But it's the greatest. The greatest proof of any historical event in history is the revelation at Sinai. And therefore, it inoculates us against any possible doubts in faith. And this is what the Rambam says means that in order to test you, God has come, meaning in order to be able to test you later. Ramban, however, says, Nachmanides says, no, it means very simple. The giving of the Torah was such an amazing experience, such a positive thing to happen in our life, that tests us. Why does it test us? Not only do we say thank you, but it tests us to see, do you realize when God does something good for you, what are you doing for him? How do you react to the goodness he's done for you? Do you do something about it? Or do you say, at best, thank you, and you move on with your life? That's the challenge. When Hashem is giving you a blessing, you say, thank you for the blessing, and now I'm going to add in my service of Hashem. I'm going to add in my davening, I'm going to add in my learning, I'm going to add in my tzedakah, I'm going to add something. That's the challenge of good fortune. And if you don't add in your good actions, then that says that's failing that test of good fortune. So that's the fifth level of challenge. So here we have 5 different aspects of challenges that Hashem gives us. Now, the challenge is not when something is easy. The challenge represents the fact when things are difficult. there's an engagement. There's an engagement that you have with something negative in your life. That engagement, when you withstand the difficulty of that challenge, that elevates that spark of godliness that is in that negative place. The Tzemach Tzedek uses an example of Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, we know, is a wicked king who set up an idol. And he had these three individual advisors, Jewish advisors, called Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And he said to them that they should bow to the idol or they're going to be thrown into a furnace. And they withstood the test, and they said, we're not going to worship the idol. They were thrown into the furnace, and miraculously they were saved. This is a story in Tanakh. So Nebuchadnezzar had a spark of godliness. He was a wicked king. The spark, therefore, was extremely deeply embedded within him, unable to be extracted. This spark originates, however, in a very high level. By Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah being tested by Nebuchadnezzar and not being affected by that test, being able to overcome the challenge, then that engagement means that they have a direct engagement with the spark of godliness that's in Nebuchadnezzar, and therefore are able to refine it and elevate it, something that there's no other way to elevate. This, by the way, is a fascinating perspective on life, because having this perspective on life enables you to see, let's say, Israel's challenges today with, say, for example, Iran. Maybe there are sparks of godliness in Iran they're unable to extract and elevate. But the fact that there is, so to speak, this negative engagement between Iran and Israel, trying to constantly threaten us and do negative things or threaten us with negative things. And Israel stands strong and tall against them. That's how we extract the sparks of godliness from them. If, however, there was a nation that has a spark of godliness in it, because everyone does, and doesn't engage with us, there's no connection, there's no involvement, then how do we get them? There's no way to elevate the spark. Only when there is engagement do you now involve yourself with it. So when you're totally enticed, let's say, like King David was, and you withstand that enticement, and you don't do the sin, that's how you elevate the spark in that negative experience. When you really, if a person doesn't eat treif because he doesn't eat treif, okay, done a good thing. But if a person is really enticed to eat the treif and he doesn't, that's when he's truly elevating that spark. So this is what we call the concept of nisyonis, the concept of tests. These are the challenges God gives us in our life. And the reason for it is in order to elevate those sparks, those deepest sparks. And when we do, what happens is we come to a state of das in Hashem, a state of knowledge and appreciation and experience of Hashem. How does that work? So we're told that, for example, let's say your challenge was in an area of a negative love or lust, and you overcome that challenge, then you will then utilize that dimension, the lust, or transform it to a love for something positive, for your spouse, for your children, for Hashem. So the negative love now turns into a positive love. If the challenge is an area of faith or das in a negative area, and by overcoming that challenge, what do? We take it from the negative, from the lack of faith. So if the challenge is in an area of faith, how could these challenging things happen? And it doesn't affect our faith in Hashem, that even though there's such terrible things taking place, but we do what we need to do based on authorities, etc. But we do not lose our emunah, our faith in Hashem. Then, when we do not lose our faith in Hashem, we actually strengthen our faith. When we overcome the challenge, it actually strengthens our faith and brings us a greater and deeper bond with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem. So that is why the verse says, when it talks about the false prophet, Hashem is testing you, ladas, in order for you to know, in order for you to appreciate, not for Hashem to know. Ladas, for you to know, for you to recognize, for you to come to an appreciation, for you to come to a deeper bond and connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem. Now there's a very fascinating Orach Chaim HaKadosh that speaks to this whole concept. Orach Chaim HaKadosh says the following, that in Egypt, the verse says, as the Egyptians enslaved the Jewish people, that's how we multiplied, and that's how we became greater and stronger. Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, because of the pain, because of the tzaros, the good gets extracted from the evil, and becomes included to the portion of good. And the good and the evil, the negative in the good, then becomes part of the evil. And this is what he means. When they made us suffer, that's how we became stronger. Why? So what the Orach Chaim HaKadosh is saying, that everything in the world has good and bad. Everything in the world has positive and negative. And when the Egyptians made us suffer, then the little bit of good that they had was extracted from them and included in us. And the little bad that we had was extracted from us and went into them. That's what the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says. Remarkable concept, which is based on the Zohar, he says, based on the Holy Zohar. So this is the idea that we're discussing here really today. And these sparks of godliness, which originate at a very high level, need us to redeem it, but once we do, they energize us, they elevate us, they lift us to higher levels. And that's the reason for all these challenges that take place. Now, let me conclude with the following thought. So is that it? So God challenges us, gives us one of 5 different kinds of challenges, and we just have to take it? I'd like to suggest, in the morning prayers we say, V'al tivienu l'dei nisayon. The blessings in the morning we say, please Hashem, do not bring us a challenge. Do not give us challenges. I'd like to suggest the following. We're asking Hashem, you don't give us a challenge. We're going to challenge ourselves. Life is about challenge. Either Hashem is going to send you a challenge, or you can challenge yourself. You could do something a little bit beyond your comfort zone, a little bit beyond what you're used to, a little bit beyond what you're able to. Then you're challenging yourself, so you're living in the world of challenge, and you don't need to be challenged otherwise. Or, to put it another way, we just said there's 5 challenges. One of the challenges is the challenge of good fortune, meaning that we look into our lives and we see Hashem's blessings. And any one of us, regardless of good or bad, of difficult things or good things that happen in our life, any one of us has blessings from God. Look at those blessings. Allow it to relate to those blessings. And then say, how am I going to thank God for my wife, for my children, for my grandchildren, for my parnasa, for whatever, what am I going to do? How am I going to challenge myself for all the good that He's blessed me with, and hope there will be no need for any other sort of challenges. And indeed, we will have the world coming to its fulfillment. We've completed the task of the refinement of these sparks that we're talking about, which we have already been told by great Jewish leaders, that this for Mashiach Tzidkenu in Yerushalayim Kodesh. And may this Pesach be already a Pesach of redemption, where we all can be together in Yerushalayim with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we say enough to all the tzaras that mankind has suffered, and enough to this coronavirus that we're suffering with today, where we once again go out of our homes, are able to be together as communities, we're able to daven together, we're able to meet together, and we would have learned whatever lessons that this had to teach us. Whatever we have been able to gain from the times we've been able to spend with our families and our homes, these are times that should enable us and inspire us to be closer and deeper and more deeply connected with those closest to us. We will have achieved the lesson, and now we can go on with our lives, and our lives can reach its ultimate state with the coming of Mashiach. Good night.
Rabbi Shapiro, thank you very much.